The rabbit who stole a god's shoes. In the time before the counting of years, when the world was still soft and the gods walked among mortals, there lived a rabbit named Pim. Pim was not a grand rabbit. He was not the swiftest, nor the wisest, nor the most cunning. He was, however, the most dissatisfied. His fur was the color of dry dust, his ears were perpetually askew, and his legs, though serviceable for a life of nibbling clover and dodging hawks, felt to him like two leaden twigs. Every morning, he watched the deer bound over the meadows with liquid grace, and the hares kick up spirals of dust in their mad dashes, and his heart ached with a bitter, green envy. Why, he would sigh to the patient old tortoise Thistle, why must I be so painfully, dreadfully common? Thistle would slowly blink her ancient, rheumy eyes. Common is safe, Pim. Common is not being eaten by a fox. But Pim would only thump his foot and grumble. He longed for renown, for a story that would be whispered in burrows for generations. He dreamed of speed so absolute that the wind itself would beg for his wake. One sweltering afternoon, a strange and potent stillness fell over the forest. The birds ceased their songs, the chittering of squirrels died away. Even the buzzing of the flies seemed to falter. A deep humming pressure filled the air, and a shimmering light, like heat haze made solid, appeared on the path before him. From this light stepped a being so bright it hurt to look upon. He was tall, wrapped in robes of woven sunlight, and his feet were encased in the most magnificent sandals Pim had ever seen. They were woven from threads of silver cloud and the sinews of rainbows, and with every step the god took, the very grass seemed to lean toward him, and the flowers lifted their heads to bloom anew. This was Zephyrus, a minor god of the south wind, known for his vanity and his divinely swift footwear. Zephyrus did not see Pim. Why would he? The rabbit was the color of a dusty pebble. The god stopped at a crystal-clear pool to admire his reflection, preening at the way his sandals shimmered in the light. He unfastened the silver buckles and placed the divine shoes on the mossy bank, wading into the water to soothe his feet after a long day of blowing gentle breezes. This was an opportunity that the gods, in their arrogance, never considered. To them a rabbit was a rabbit, no different from a stone or a blade of grass. But Pim was not a stone. Pim was a creature of profound, burning desire. His heart, usually a timid thumping drum in his chest, became a warhammer. This was his moment. The universe, in its infinite and terrifying cruelty, was presenting him with everything he had ever wanted. He did not hesitate. He crept, his belly flat to the dirt, his askew ears pinned back. He was a shadow, a whisper. And with a surge of desperate courage, he darted forward. His teeth, usually reserved for dandelions, clamped onto a leathery strap of one sandal. He pulled. It was like trying to drag a mountain. The sandal was infused with the weight of the wind it commanded. But Pim put his entire soul into the effort, his small muscles screaming in protest. The sandal budged, then slipped free. He didn't wait for the other. He scrambled away, the divine sandal, impossibly large and heavy, bumping against his hind legs. Zephyrus whirled around, his beautiful face contorted with shock and rage. "You," he bellowed, his voice like a sudden gale. "Insignificant speck, give that back." But Pim was already running, and in his fear he did something he had never done before. He stopped thinking. He stopped wanting. He simply was. He shoved his front paws into the sandal. It was vastly too large. But as his foot touched the inside, the shoe sighed and shrank, molding itself perfectly to his form. A jolt, like lightning made of honey and pure energy, shot up his leg and exploded in his chest. The world changed. He wasn't running anymore. He was stitching himself through the fabric of the world. The trees blurred into streaks of green and brown. The ground became a flowing river of earth. The wind, which had been his opponent, became his willing bride, carrying him, caressing him, rejoicing in his passage. Zephyrus's enraged shouts and the distant boom of a divine footstep on the path behind him were the only things that tethered him to reality. He ran, and he ran, and he ran. He ran through the tall grass, and the stalks only trembled after he had passed. He ran over the sleeping form of a bear, and the great beast didn't even stir. He ran across a lake, his feet finding purchase on the very surface tension of the water. He was a streak of pure, ecstatic velocity. He finally came to rest on a high rocky outcropping, far from the forest. He was panting, but not from exhaustion. He was panting from exhilaration. He looked down at the divine sandal on his foot. It was warm and pulsed with a soft, silvery light. Power, raw and magnificent, thrummed through his veins. He was Pim the Swift. He was no longer common. He was a legend. His first act of legendary speed was to find the elder tortoise Thistle. He appeared before her with a pop of displaced air. "Thistle, look," he squeaked, doing a little jig that was so fast his legs became a blur. "I did it! I stole the very speed of a god." Thistle slowly retracted her head into her shell, then with equal slowness, poked it out again. Her face was a study in profound disapproval. "You did a foolish thing, Pim. The gods do not like to be robbed." But Pim was beyond listening. He was drunk on his own velocity. He raced the sparrows and won. He played tag with the lightning bugs, a game so unfair, it was comical. He traveled to the next valley and back, before his own echo could catch up. He became the terror of the local foxes, a blur that taunted them, nipping their tails, and then appearing a mile away, laughing. His fame spread. The animals spoke of the dust devil in hushed, reverent tones. Pim basked in it. He became arrogant. He would run circles around the other rabbits until they grew dizzy and sick. He'd snatch food from under the noses of the badgers simply because he could. He had traded his quiet, common life for one of glorious, dizzying speed, and he loved it. But he had forgotten the god. A single sandal was no mere trinket. It was a physical piece of Zephyrus's divine domain. The god had tracked him not by sight, but by the disturbance Pim created in the very fabric of the air. The rabbit was a stone thrown into a still pond, and the ripples were an open book to the god of the south wind. One evening, as Pim was resting, the world fell silent again. The same shimmering light appeared, but this time it was cold, a pale, unforgiving white. Zephyrus stepped out, his one bare foot, a terrible sight to behold, leaving scorch marks on the earth. He still wore the other sandal, which hummed in recognition of its twin. "Thief," Zephyrus said, his voice soft and dangerous. The air around him grew still, so still that Pim couldn't breathe. The wind, his friend, had abandoned him. Pim's bravado evaporated. He was a small, dusty rabbit again, cowering before a god. He tried to run. He pushed off with every ounce of the sandal's power, but he only managed a few feet before an invisible wall of still, dead air slammed into him, throwing him back. Zephyrus walked toward him slowly. "You are a creature of mud and burrows," he said, looking down at him with contempt. "You stole a piece of the sky, and you thought it was yours." He reached down and with gentle, horrifying finality, unlatched the silver buckle from Pim's foot. As the sandal came free, it was as if the world fell out from under Pim. The energy, the thrill, the wind, all of it was torn away. His legs in that moment felt heavier than they ever had before. They were not just leaden now, they were granite, useless stones attached to his hips. The god slipped the sandal back on his own foot, completing his divine set. "You are not worthy of the wind," Zephyrus declared. "You only ever cared for what it could give you. You never sought to understand it, to be one with it. You are a creature of the earth, and so the earth shall claim you." With a flick of his wrist, Zephyrus bound Pim's feet to the ground. It was not a physical chain, but a divine command. Pim's legs could not move, not even to hop. He was rooted to the spot. The god, his sandals gleaming, turned and vanished into the shimmering light, leaving Pim utterly and completely still. For a full day and a full night, Pim stayed there, a prisoner in his own body. The forest moved on without him. He saw the other rabbits bound past, their movements now looking like a slow, graceful dance he could only dream of. The hawks circled, and for the first time he couldn't run, he could only wait. He wept. The tears fell on the earth around his stone-like feet. And then, Thistle appeared. She had taken all day to crawl from her side of the forest. She sat before him, her ancient eyes full of a sorrow that was also a kind of wisdom. "You were given a gift you did not earn," she said, her voice slow like honey dripping from a spoon. "And so it was taken away." "I can't move, Thistle," Pim sobbed. "I'm nothing. I'm worse than nothing. I'm a rock." You were always a rock, she said, but there was no cruelty in it. And a rock has its own wisdom. A rock does not need to be fast. A rock sits and watches. It is part of the place it inhabits. It does not lust for the horizon, but it knows every detail of the ground beneath it. Pim was silent, forced for the first time in his life to be still. He watched a beetle painstakingly push a ball of dung. He saw a flower bud slowly, very slowly, unfurl its petals to greet the morning sun. He noticed the intricate patterns of frost on a fallen leaf. He felt the soil beneath him, teeming with a silent, patient life he had always been too fast to perceive. His punishment was his teaching. The stillness was his lesson. A week passed. The divine command on his legs, having served its purpose, finally loosened its grip. One morning, Pim found he could move. He took a tentative hop. He was still slow. He was still common. He was still Pim. But he was different. The bitter green envy that had soured his heart was gone, replaced by a quiet, deep green contentment. He didn't try to bound. He didn't compare himself to the deer or the hares. He moved slowly, deliberately, with a new appreciation for the time between one footfall and the next. He was slower than ever, but he saw more. He felt the earth under his pads. He smelled the change of the seasons in the breeze. He heard the stories of the wind, as it whispered through the grass. No longer his ally, but no longer his enemy. It was simply the wind. He became known not as Pim the Swift, but as Pim the Watcher. The foxes still ran, but he would see them coming from a half-day's distance and simply amble into the deepest briar patch, where they could not follow. He didn't need to run. He just needed to be wise. His story was told not as a tale of glory, but of humility. The young rabbits would gather around him and ask, "Grandfather Pim, is it true you once stole a god's shoe?" Pim would blink slowly, a ghost of a smile on his whiskered face. "It is true," he would say, "and I learned that the greatest speed is not in the legs, but in the heart. It is the speed to stop, to sit, to see. A rabbit who can do that is faster than any god, for he has arrived exactly where he is meant to be. And he doesn't need to run from the truth of who he is." And the young rabbits, though they did not fully understand, would nod and feel, for a moment, a deep, quiet peace settle in their small, thumping hearts. What's the biggest slow down and learn moment you've ever had? Would you rather be fast and arrogant, or slow and wise? Feel free to express yourself below.